Episode 765. The dungeon battle raged on. Wudi Zujunling, now gripping his dragon-slaying axe, was finally done coasting. He charged to the front lines with savage ferocity. From the rear, Xinlu shifted her focus onto him, watching closely. She finally realized that his actions needed no direction from her at all. He was coordinating with the team perfectly. When he pulled up the damage meter for another look, Xinlu was taken aback. Invincible Most Handsome was still in 9th place, second to last, but his damage output had jumped significantly. Before, he'd only had a third of 8th place's numbers, but now he'd shot up to a full 2/3 of 8th place's output. In that time, all they'd done was kill one boss and clear 3 waves of adds. 3 waves of mobs. Even though Invincible Handsome had swapped weapons, there was no way that alone could boost his damage output this much. The real key was during the first boss kill. The boss's health pool was enough to rival many waves of mobs, but at that time, Invincible Handsome was still using his original gear. Compared to the others, he had no real advantage, yet he managed to close the gap in the damage charts. That speaks to his technique. Clearly, this guy's skill is nothing short of extraordinary. Noticing this, Xinlu began watching Wudi Zuijunlang more closely. Wielding his hand-guarded dragon-slaying axe, he carved his way in and out of the fray. By now, Wudi Zuijunlang had become the most eye-catching figure in the team. When Xinlu pulled up the damage meter again to keep tabs, Wudi Zuijunlang's numbers were climbing steadily. The gap between him and 8th place was shrinking fast, and once he caught up to 8th, he'd be neck and neck with the rest. The top 7 DPS players were all roughly on the same level. Their numbers might vary, but the differences were marginal, nothing that showed a clear advantage. And sitting at the top of the DPS charts was none other than this fragile bean MT. After all, he had the gear advantage, and a tank's attack power couldn't afford to be too low in the first place. Damage output itself is a major source of aggro. Relying solely on aggro-generating skills would never be enough to hold threats steady.
This one's no pushover.
Xinlu finally reached that conclusion, and by now it wasn't just him. Other players who habitually flicked through the damage meters had also noticed that Slacker, who was now rising like a sword through the ranks. Sure, the guy had snagged a weapon from the ancient dragon abyss, giving him a slight edge in gear. But when it came down to it, everyone was still rocking level 70 equipment. The difference in stats couldn't possibly make one player soar while another sank. Invincible the Most Handsome's rapid climb in DPS clearly wasn't just because of that single weapon. The other DPS players were all pushing themselves hard too. PvE might pit players against system-controlled NPCs. But honestly, the real fun lies in the competition between players. PvE just makes that competition more indirect compared to PvP. In glory terms, PvP is a brawl, while PvE-style competition is a battle of wits. Right now, the players in the instance were locked in a battle of wits over their damage output. No one dared to fall behind. With this surge of effort, their combat power climbed another notch, and the dungeon clear speed picked up even more. Before long, they had pushed all the way to the second boss of the ancient dragon abyss. They paused again to rest and regroup. Hey stepped forward to pull the boss, but Wudi Zuijunlang followed right on his heels again. Crispine was speechless, but the journey so far had proven that Invincible Most Handsome really didn't seem to have any intention of causing trouble, and the first boss fight had shown he could control his aggro just fine, never making it harder for the MT to build threat. So Crispine, his face dark as coal, stayed silent. He just kept fighting on his own, but he was still keeping an eye on this Invincible Most Handsome guy's technique. Then he noticed that this time, Invincible Most Handsome seemed slightly different from his last boss fight. Meanwhile, the other 7 players were already getting pretty anxious. By the time he reached the boss, Invincible Most Handsome had finally closed the 1/3 damage gap. He was still in 9th place, but the difference was now razor thin. And now, in the middle of the boss fight, he'd already charged in and started dealing damage. They were stuck staring at the sidelines. With that gap widening, they'd have to watch Wudi Zuijunlang overtake their DPS. But the MT hadn't given the order yet, so they didn't dare move. Meanwhile, Wudi Zuijunlang had the nerve to follow the MT's lead without pulling aggro. They didn't have that skill. They figured it was probably because he came from a tanking background and knew the knight class inside out, which let him develop such precise aggro control. Sure, regular players could manage aggro to some degree, but none could control it with this level of accuracy. The 7 players just stared at each other, waiting in vain for Crispy Bean to say something, and their contempt for this so-called tank only grew. They thought to themselves,
"What the hell are you doing? Can't even hold aggro after all this time."
Heavens as my witness, only 5 seconds had passed since Crispine pulled aggro. But with 7 players watching Invincible Handsomest already charging into DPS, each second felt like an eternity. Finally, they heard Crispine shout the go-ahead, and the 7 players who'd been itching to move surged forward like wolves. They charged way too hard. One of them even slammed right into Kuidu. Friendly fire wasn't possible, but all that jostling could still cause some displacement. And sure enough, Kuidu got knocked clean off position. He raised his shield to block, but caught nothing but air. The second boss drove its sword straight into his side.
"What are you doing?"
Crisp Bean erupted in fury, barking out a reprimand. What ordinary player would dare to go toe-to-toe with an MT? He quickly apologized and shuffled back 2 steps. But then he immediately threw himself back into the fight with renewed vigor. If he didn't keep up the damage, he'd get left behind, and that would be just embarrassing. The DPS were tearing into the boss with relentless fury, blood bubbles bursting from its hide, and with a MT who was just on another level entirely. The boss fight suddenly felt like it had no challenge at all. Soon enough, the second boss went down as well. But at this moment, the players didn't immediately check what gear had dropped. Instead, everyone pulled up the damage meter, and lo and behold, in the time it took to down 1 boss, Woody Zui Junlong had already left all 7 of them in the dust. And compared to the neck-and-neck gap between the 7 of them, the second-place player, Invincible Most Handsome, had clearly opened up a chasm. Meanwhile, the distance between him and the far-ahead first-place player, Crisp Bean, who had the advantage of superior gear, was shrinking at a rapid pace.
"That's insane."
At this point, the crowd had no choice but to concede. He was coasting at first, but the moment he stopped, his damage output turned fierce. Add in the weapon advantage, and there's really no comparison.